He's one of the most prolific, iconic undercover law enforcement agents in recent American history. Many of you know him by his undercover name, Donnie Brasco, that he used to infiltrate and take down the American Mafia. Welcome to the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. In the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show, we are joined by special guests talking about their experiences, the realities of investigating crimes, plus those who have experienced horrendous trauma. Police, first responders, military, and victims of crime share their stories. Hi, I'm John J. Wiley. In addition to being a broadcaster, I'm also a retired police sergeant. Be sure to check out our website, letradio.com, and also like us on Facebook. Search for the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. Of all the radio stations in the United States, there are no other shows like the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. And on Facebook, there's only one official page. Do a search on Facebook for the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. And be sure to like the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show Facebook page. Calling us from the great state of New Jersey, and I say great state because I was born there. I was born at Passaic. Didn't live there very long. I was a Navy family. We have Joe Pistone on the phone. A lot of people may not recognize his name, but you know his undercover name, Donnie Brasco. Joe, thanks so much for being a guest on the show. Very much appreciated.
Thanks for having me on. I appreciate that.
You know, it's a pleasure, and I got to be honest with you. Joe is one of these guys I've wanted to have on for a long time. There are, and I've worked with some great police in my career, and I've had many great officers on the show. And there are a handful that are so well known because of what they've done that they've become, and I hate to use this term, celebrities in a way. And in my opinion, Joe is one of those guys. And I mean that with the utmost respect.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
So you're not used to being labeled as a celebrity, are you?
No.
Yeah, isn't that funny? Here we got a guy. Yeah. Your job was, and for those who don't know, Joe is a former FBI agent. He worked undercover for a long time. We're going to talk about it, infiltrating the New York Mafia under the cover name of Donnie Brasco. He wrote a book called Donnie Brasco, My Undercover Life in the Mafia. And he's got a podcast called Deep Cover, the real Donnie Brasco podcast. And there's a movie, by the way, highly successful movie, which I loved, called Donnie Brasco. That's a lot for one guy, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And, you know, when as you know, you go into law enforcement, you know, you don't go into it for money, that's for sure. You go into it because you want to do what's right, and you have a love for it. And to me, and I'm sure you know, it wasn't a job, it was a profession. And, you know, when I got into it, I knew I was going to stay into it for a long time. I was fortunate enough to be accepted into the FBI, and I stayed with them for over 20-some years, and was, I don't know if it was not fortunate enough to, you know, be successful in all my undercover operations. And I guess the most successful one was I had infiltrated the Mafia in New York City, and I was undercover with the Bonanno family for a little over 5 years, and I was with the Colombo family. That was the first family I infiltrated. So for a total of 6 years, I was undercover with the Mafia as an FBI agent. And again, you know, while you're doing it, it's like any other investigation. You don't expect it to go worldwide, nationwide, well, worldwide, and to become, you know, such a talked about case. But it so happened that we were lucky enough to complete it, do a good job, and put a lot of people in jail, and was a catalyst, everybody says, and I have to agree with it, for bringing down the American Mafia to just another organized crime group.
By the way, it's phenomenal what you did, and I understand why you might downplay it a little bit. First of all, I don't know about you. When people say thank you for your service, I never know quite how to respond, because we've been conditioned to say, just doing my job, you know, I was at the right place, right time. And we work with some real heroes doing heroic stuff. And we never want to blow our own horn. But I got to tell you, your job, what you volunteered for, you did some real heroic stuff. And it wasn't just you. It was your family as well, because they paid a heavy price.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you know, after the first 4 or 5 months of the operation, my family was moved across the country, so I was living in New York City in my undercover apartment, and my family was, across the country. So I didn't get to see them very often during the 6 years. And, it was up to my wife to raise three children. So, if you call anybody a hero, it has to be the spouse or, the significant other in these type of situations.
One of the things I do correct people on, and it's not a whole lot because it's just not worth the effort when it comes to police work. But one of the things I will correct people on is they'll say, and they'll talk about my career because I worked narcotics for a long time in Baltimore, was detailed at DEA and all that. And they'll say I was undercover, and I explain to them, no, I wasn't. There was, there's a plainclothes narcotics surveillance kind of guy, which is what I did. I specialized in. Then you had undercovers who would do buys and do things like that. Then you had what you did, which is deep cover. And there's a big difference between all three. And I'll be honest with you, I was horrible at undercover. And so doing deep cover, forget it. I don't think I could pass the acting test.
Yeah, well, I'm not so sure. Well, first of all, for your audience, there is a difference between the types of undercover. And long-term deep undercover is what most individuals can't do and don't want to do, because when you go into a deep cover situation, what you do is you leave everything behind. You leave your gun behind, you leave your badge behind, you leave your credentials behind. It's all locked in the office. And once you walk out of that office, you don't go back until the operation's over, in our agency anyway. And if you're fortunate enough to infiltrate the group that you've targeted, that's your whole existence now, is that target group, that organized crime group or whatever group it is. And you have your own apartment. You're devoid of your family, your friends, and it's an existence where your only relationship are the bad guys, and your only thread to your organization is your contact agent, and that's one individual that is supposed to be looking out for your welfare as far as servicing your needs in your undercover situation.
That's a great point you brought up. Did you ever feel like you were unattended or on your own and not part of the group anymore?
No, not really. Not really. You had mentioned acting, and to me, undercover is not being a good actor. It's being yourself. Not changing or trying to change your personality. The only thing to me when I worked undercover was I changed my name. That was it. Other than that, my personality stayed the same. My moral course stayed the same. So, and I think that's why I was successful, probably because I didn't try to become a gangster. I didn't try to, I didn't try to become a real gangster. I mean,
we're going to take a short break. We are talking with Joe Pistone. You might know him as Donnie Brasco. This is a law enforcement show. We're going to take a short break. We'll be right back. What is the Newsbreak app, and why should you follow the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show and podcast on the Newsbreak app? Newsbreak is your number one local news app for current events, free live news for you and your community. Download the Newsbreak app today for free, and be sure to follow the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show and podcast on the Newsbreak app.
Did you know that there are people earning $30,000 or more per month from Meta or Facebook? Did you know that you can too? All without breaking the time bank. Learn how to work smarter and not harder on Facebook. Get step-by-step instructions on what to do and what not to do. Start with a free membership. Get details at letbreak.com. letbreak.com. That's letbreak.com.
Return to conversation with Joe Pistone on the Law Enforcement Show, also known as Donnie Brasco. And before we enter the break, Joe, you're talking about you didn't really, in your undercover work, consider yourself an actor. You were you. You were the same guy you've always been, and just how somehow convince people that you were a gangster. You didn't lose your moral compass. You didn't lose so much of what Hollywood loves to talk about. You were the same guy.
That's exactly right. I mean, they say you got to be an extrovert to be a great undercover agent. Well, I'm not really an extrovert. I'm kind of to myself. I don't try to put myself out there. And I did the same thing, in my undercover role. I just was who I am. And because, you can't try to become somebody else. Look, you work the streets, gangsters, and that's all type of gangsters. They got a good BS barometer. They can tell when somebody's bull and when somebody isn't.
Right.
As far as, how they act, as far as their personality, etc. And, I never tried to put anything on, I mean, I'm basically a quiet guy, and that's how I was. I talk when I need to talk. I don't talk to fill up space. And that's how I carried myself through any of my undercover operations.
That sounds a lot like a lot of cops I know as well. They have that radar about them. They can tell when someone's lying, and they tend not to want to talk to a whole lot of people either.
Exactly. A lot of, you mentioned the entertainment and TV, and, I always hear and that's why I don't watch a lot of cop shows, actually. I don't watch hardly any America. If I watch any cop shows, it's all foreign because they got great scripts. The actors and actresses are normal people. They look like normal people, and they act like normal people. And I always get a kick out of the American shows where, you got the undercovers, is the flash, the cash, and trying to be a tough guy or tough gal out there drinking. An example, I'm not a drinker. I never was a drinker. The extent of my consumption is maybe a half a bottle of beer and a glass of red wine. After that, I'm done. I don't go any further, and I never did. And I grew up in a pretty rough neighborhood. I grew up in Paterson, New Jersey, and I grew up around bars, and I grew up around, guys that were gangsters. And when I worked undercover, I didn't see any reason to try to portray myself as somebody that liked to drink and everything, and I never did. And anybody said, Donnie, you don't drink anymore than you can. I never see you finish a bottle of beer. And I say, well, because I can't. I don't. That's it.
It's funny you bring it up. I'm a sober guy. I've been sober 29 years, but I'm Irish descent, and there's a reason why I don't drink, because I turn into that guy. And my grandfather opened up an Irish tavern in Paterson many, many, many years ago. It's no longer around, and I know that area. And a lot of what you did, and with a lot of the FBI and NYPD, they really made a big impact on cleaning up New York City and northern New Jersey. And I just have a big concern that we're backsliding, but I want to cover that later. When you're going in the FBI, you had a choice. Growing up in Paterson, you had a choice of, hey, which side of the fence do I want to be on? And I believe in the law enforcement world, that's just my opinion, the difference between the gangsters, the criminals, and the cops, the same game, different sides of the fence. And some people reach a point in their life where they have to make a decision. Which side do I want to be on? Did you find yourself making that choice?
Well, like I said, I grew up in an Italian neighborhood. I grew up with, wise guys in the neighborhood. I grew up, being around the social clubs. My father was always in the bar business, but he always said, look, these aren't the guys you want to get mixed up with. You don't want to, it's all right hanging around, because what else are you going to do in the neighborhood? You got to hang around the neighborhood, but you don't want to get involved in anything with them. And, I attribute to that. And then I had a couple buddies whose fathers were cops. And, I looked up to them, their fathers more than the gangsters, even though you see the gangsters with the big cars and the cash and everything. That never really attracted me. And again, because, the talks I would get from my dad about that. So I'd never really, even when I was working under, you know, I mean, you're there, you see the money, you see this, you see that, but I knew I never wanted to, you know, I was always going to be on the right side, and just, I was always focused. I was always focused on my job. And to me, working undercover was just another form of investigation. It just so happened it was, you know, a covert investigation and not overt. So,
and that's a pretty simplistic way of stating it. The reality is, for police that are law enforcement that work in undercover with organized crime gangs, there's always a threat. There's a threat of being made. And with that means there's a threat of violence, there's a threat of being killed, there's a threat of your family retaliation. There's a lot of things. So I really appreciate you downplaying that part, but I also really appreciate the fact that you had to choose to do this. It wasn't something that you were volunteered for, was it?
Well, you know, in the FBI, undercover is a you know, you do have to volunteer to work undercover. They don't tell you, hey, you got to do this, or you know, in the undercover field. And it just so, you know, it's like anything else, John, is that when you're good at something, you know, they keep throwing you the cases. You know, if you're a good accountant, if you could work bank cases and find out, you know, where the money's going, if you're a good stocks and bonds agent, that you know, you can work that stuff because you're an accountant, that's what you're going to keep working. I just was lucky in that being a street guy, growing up on the streets, knowing the street, and I think that's important in undercover, that you in undercover when you're working gangsters, working organized crime groups, no matter what it is, that you know the streets. And since I did know the streets and I was successful in my undercover endeavors, so when one ended, you know, and another one came up, they said, you know, hey, Joe, you want to, you know, we got this case, you want to, you know, you want to give it a go, you want to give it a crack. And again, being street smart, and, you know, as a police officer, you know that being street smart is, you know, that's probably 75%, 80% of your, you know.
It might save your life and might save someone else's. This is the Law Enforcement Show. We're talking with Joe Pistone. If you're on the Clubhouse drop-in audio chat app, be sure to look for me and follow me. My name's John, the letter J, Wiley, W-I-L-E-Y. You can also search for @LET Radio Show. That's John J. Wiley, W-I-L-E-Y, @LET Radio Show on the Clubhouse drop-in audio chat app. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
Did you know that Facebook has an estimated 3 billion active users all across the planet? Want to increase your presence and profit using Facebook? Learn how you can do that every day, like I do. Plus, you can earn revenue from Meta every month. All this without breaking the time bank. Learn how to work smarter and not harder on Facebook. Get step-by-step instructions on what to do and what not to do. Start with a free membership. Get details at letbreak.com, letbreak.com. That's letbreak.com.
Get access to free podcast versions of the show and more on Facebook. Do a search for the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show and be sure to click like. Back to our conversation on the Law Enforcement Show with Joe Pistone. Joe, undercover FBI agent for a long time, infiltrated the New York Mafia and his cover story, Donnie Brasco. He's a successful podcaster. He's got the movie Donnie Brasco, which was phenomenal, his book, and it's just an honor to have you here. Part of your career is fascinating. First of all, Americans, and I'm not sure why, I have my suspicions, but Americans tend to have a fascination with mobsters and gangsters and mob movies. And I got to tell you the truth, I'm a fan of The Godfather 1 and 2, not 3. Also like Goodfellas and a couple other ones that I enjoy. But I know that it's made up. I know that these people are not 100% like they're portrayed. And on the flip side, Hollywood has a way of portraying law enforcement as stumbling, bumbling idiots, crooked, violent, whatever it is. So I know your career's not been like that.
Exactly. You know, you mentioned that, and it does make me laugh if I do watch a movie and you know, they have an FBI agent like he's out of space or something. I mean, I don't know that they don't realize, and especially and the same thing with police officers. You know, I mean, guys are college educated. They got, you know, a lot of them have master's degrees, doctorate degrees. I mean, in the FBI, I know of 2 heart surgeons. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, they're not slouches.
And it's the same thing, you know, they portray detectives, you know, as bumblers. And I mean, it's like, and they glorify the gangsters.
Yeah, and
they
make the gangsters look like they're so Robin Hood-ish and they're so noble. And look, I'm just looking out for the little guy. And I'll be honest with you. I see some of these documentaries, and I'm a fiend when it comes to these documentaries. And I'll watch ones like, and I'm not going to give their names, but part of the crime family in New York, one of the crime families, and his big thing was the gas station scam and all this other stuff. Right. And then he turned state's evidence, and I'm like, yeah, I understand it, I get it, but don't be preaching to me afterwards about how noble you were.
Well, you know, I found that there's no honor amongst thieves. You know, I mean, none at all. And I found that in my 6 years with the mob. I mean, there's more jealousy and envy going on amongst these guys and between these guys. Like, oh my God, you know, one guy's jealous that the other guy's closer to the captain, the capo, his boss, than he is. The other guy's jealous because the other guy's making more money than he is. I mean, it's like, you know, like I said, there's no honor amongst these guys. And they'll slice one another's throat just to get closer to the boss, or you know, to make more money than the other guy in the crew. It's a crazy life.
So they're not as they're portrayed to be in television. They're not like the stoic, heroic Godfather figure in those movies, and they're not like. They're more like Joe Pesci in Goodfellas than they are like De Niro, Pacino. They're just not. And here's one of the things I got to admit. I got to confess on myself a little bit. If you look at me, and I tell people this, when I'm 85 and using a walker and have the tennis balls in front of it, people will probably go, oh, shh, there's 5-0. He's a cop. Because I look like, even in my old age, I look like a knuckle-dragging Neanderthal Cretan cop. You, on the other hand, for people, do a Google search for Joe Pistone, and throughout the years, you look at him and say, that's a stereotypical New York gangster right there. Isn't that funny?
Yeah, it is. I'll tell you a funny story, if I may. My gangster partner, when I say partner, you know, in the mob, everybody has a partner. We went in and had a meeting with a banker one day, and it wasn't it wasn't a legit banker, but after the meeting was over, I walk out and my gangster partner's still talking to the guy, and the guy says, "Man, I'm afraid of him." He said, "He's a stone cold killer. I don't know if I want to get it." And my partner, after we, you know, and I say my partner because, you know, with these groups, every bad guy has a partner.
Right.
And my partner come out laughing, and he said, I got almost 20 hits under my belt, and this guy's afraid of you.
Isn't that something?
It's crazy, right?
It's funny, but you've got, and this goes back to the street smarts and part of the ethnic neighborhood you lived in, which, by the way, I miss those neighborhoods because I used to go to New York and New Jersey, visit family when I was a kid. And one of the things I loved about it, and I still do because Baltimore had some of this for a long time. A lot of it's gone. Yeah. But you had Polish neighborhoods, you had German neighborhoods, you had Italian neighborhoods, you had Irish neighborhoods, and they all had a distinct feel to them. And people love to make a big deal like out of West Side Story and those sort of things. That may have happened to some degree, but there was a lot of, I think, our individuality as people, as a group, that is missing from our current society. Do you ever feel like that?
Yes, I do, and I think you're 100% correct. And, you know, when you had the neighborhoods, like I say, you had the Irish neighborhood, you had the Italian, the Jewish, you had the black areas. But, when I was growing up, everybody got along. You had your own neighborhood, so there was a good feel about it, you know. You had the stores, being Italian, the stores, they all sold Italian, type specialty foods. The same thing in the like we used to go into the Jewish neighborhood and get the fresh baked bagels. There was no bagel store in the Italian neighborhood, but you went into the Jewish neighborhood and it was a little store and they made the bagels fresh right there. And I think that missing that and doing away with that type of camaraderie in the neighborhoods, I think that has a lot to do with what the is going on in the country today.
I think that, and I agree with you. We've gotten almost like too homogenized, and the only group of people I see that do this well and still kind of hang on to their roots in America is some of the Caribbean countries. I think it's phenomenal they do that. They have Caribbean stores, and we have our parades, and we do. Good on you. Absolutely good on you. Now, it seems like it's anti-everybody else, but that's getting off topic. I want to get back to you. Two things we're going to talk about is, I'll be honest with you, I love the movie. I'm not a huge Johnny Depp fan, but I love the movie. Mm-hmm. And there are two scenes in the movie that stick out to me. And when we return from break, I do want to cover these and find out how accurate they are. Number one was a scene, I think, is in the airport where your character was flying either to Miami or something like that, and he was afraid of being made by another law enforcement officer. And the other one is, it seems like life was great for you and your family, and then all of a sudden, everything was horrible. And I know that they have to compress things, and I know they have to use drama to make the movie sellable. Right. We're going to return to our conversation with Joe Pistone, also known as Donnie Brasco. This is the Law Enforcement Today show. When we return, we're going to talk about that, and we're going to talk about his life after the FBI. Lots of fascinating things heading your way. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
Imagine contacting millions of people every month using Facebook from the comfort of your home or business. How much would you increase the success of your business or service if you could do that? I do that every day, and so can you. Plus, earn a separate revenue from Meta. Learn how to work smarter and not harder on Facebook. Get step-by-step instructions on what to do and what not to do. Start with a free membership. Get details at letbreak.com. letbreak.com. That's letbreak.com.
Be sure to follow the Law Enforcement Talk radio show and podcast on the Newsbreak app. Newsbreak is your number one local news app for current events, free live news for you and your community. Download the Newsbreak app today for free, and be sure to follow the Law Enforcement Talk radio show and podcast on the Newsbreak app. Back to our conversation with Joe Pistone on the Law Enforcement Show, former FBI agent, also author. He's a successful podcaster. He's, of course, got the movie Donnie Brasco. And I want to say this, Donnie Brasco is a brand name. People know that. Joe Pistone is also a brand name. I think some people may not recognize it as much, but the two, do you ever find yourself where you want to say, look, I'm sick and tired of talking about Donnie Brasco and that part of my life?
Well, yeah, but hey, it is what it is, I can't change it, so it's just part of what it is now. And I do, I am grateful that I was able to get a couple books out of it, a movie, TV show, and the movie. If you talk about the movie, I was kind of lucky in that the movie is about 85% true, which when they make a movie off a book, it most of the time you don't even know it. it's the same situation.
Right.
But there are certain. I want to make this clear to your listeners, those who have seen the movie, and those who haven't seen it yet. And it plays all the time. I mean, it's always on television, and I think it's still on Netflix and those other channels. But there's one scene in that movie where I slapped my wife. That never happened. That never, ever happened. That was a scene that the director put in on the day of filming. That was not in the original script. And we never saw a psychiatrist. We never went to, because I was never home long enough to go see a psychiatrist. And you have mentioned prior, there was a scene in the airport, Miami airport, where I slugged a guy. Well, that guy was an attorney that I knew. He was a government attorney, and he recognized me in the airport, and he started to call my name, and I walked up and I slugged him because I was with Sonny Black, who was my boss in the Bonanno family, and I wanted to, rectify the situation right away. So I hit him, and me and Sonny kept walking, and Sonny said, "Donnie, what did you do? What did you hit that guy for?" I said, "Sonny, didn't you see him? The guy was walking toward me, and he was looking at my." And he said, "Oh, okay." So we kept walking.
It's good to know that happened because you had to think on your feet. And I'm glad to hear that part did happen. The funny thing is, when you're talking about the scene with your wife, I never thought that part about you hitting her was real. And, I totally forgot about it till you mentioned that. And they love to throw that in there. Hollywood loves to throw that in there. What I objected to is the oversimplification. It's like, okay, you're working undercover, things are great at home, everybody understands, and all of a sudden then there's horror, and it's, your whole marriage is on the rocks. And I never bought into that was the case. She knew what you were in for, what the job entailed before that ever occurred.
Exactly, because like I say, this wasn't my first undercover job. I had just come off a year and a half undercover job that I was away from home on that one too. She always knew that I was working undercover. Of course, she never knew what the case was. Yeah, and there was never any just a step away from a divorce. I mean, I'm married to the same lady now. I can't tell you how many years. I mean, if I tell you how many years, then you'll go, "Oh my God!" Then
you make me look like a young guy. But before I forget, tell her I said thank you, because I know her life wasn't easy, and I do appreciate, because you can't do this by yourself. You just cannot do it. No. But there came a point where your career was ending, and then here I think is a really magical part. From your experience, which is phenomenal, and your work was phenomenal, all of a sudden, and it makes it sound like it's overnight, but a book is written, then a movie's made. You say you got a couple books. You've got a podcast, which, by the way, is doing really, really well. I think it's really powerful that you can take your experience and from that grow it into all these media success stories. Because if you're like me, when I retired from police work, I got hurt and retired young. I was like, what do I do now? All I know how to do is be a cop. I don't know what to do.
Yeah, I mean, like I say, it was a stroke of luck that the case went nationwide. The case went world. I mean, I work all over the world as far as with governments, with the federal police forces, lecturing and talking about organized crime, gang groups, how to infiltrate them, how to investigate them. So I've been lucky in that. I mean, I've been to places, that I wouldn't go on vacation, and I mean, which is, I mean, I might have gone to Russia. I've been to Russia 3 times. They even sent me to Siberia to do a 2-week course on organized crime. I've been to third world countries. So it afforded me a lot of good travel and experiences, meeting other police officers from around the world. And when you come down to it, they're the same. You know, they all have the same goals. They're not in it for the money. In most of these countries, they don't make, squat, let alone in for the money. They're in for it because they want to do the right thing.
Yeah, I wanted to be a priest before I became a cop. And I always say a night with beer and a date kind of changed my whole calling in life.
That's a good one.
Well, it's the truth. It's the truth. And then immediately after that, I told my dad, he was a Navy guy, and he says, all right, so you're not going to be a priest. What do you want to do? I said, I want to be a cop. He's like, oh, I think he feigned a heart attack. Oh, my goodness, you got to be kidding me. Because it wasn't part of our family background.
Yeah, right.
But here you are. You've got the Donnie Brasco movie, which I've seen it before. It's great. And I'm with you. I watch a lot of BBC police stuff. I don't watch American police stuff because character development, storylines, things like that. And I think they do a better job. Also, you've got your book. And like Rob Starkman, he says you guys are friends. You help him give advice on writing his book, what to do, what not to do. And then you've got this very successful podcast. What's it called?
Deep Cover, The Real Donnie Brasco.
And that is, from you look at like Chartable and a few other ones, that's the top 0.5% of podcasts worldwide. Very successful. My hat's off to you. That's awesome.
Well, thank you. And, the audience can get on Jam Street Media. That's a production company.
And I've talked to them as well. And they're the ones who lined up our interview, which I think is a great job by them as well.
Exactly. And, otherwise, they can get it on Apple or any other place to get their podcast. But Jam Street Media is a production company. And if they go on there, then a new episode drops every Wednesday. We finished season 1. We did 19 episodes of season 1. And we started season 2.
Phenomenal stuff. People need to check it out. It is called Deep Cover, the Real Donnie Brasco podcast. Joe, I want to thank you so much for all you've done. You've been a phenomenal guest. And next time you are in Florida, we definitely have to get together for lunch or coffee or something of that nature.
Okay.
It's all very much appreciated. And again, tell Mrs. Pistone I said thank you very much. All she's done is very much appreciated as well.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And be safe.
This was a podcast version of the nationally syndicated Law Enforcement Talk radio show, and we are so glad that you decided to join us. Big thanks to our guests for telling their story on the show. 2 simple things you can do. Be sure to check out our website, letradio.com. That's letradio.com. And be sure to follow us or like us on Facebook. Do a search on Facebook for Law Enforcement Talk radio show. And be sure when you see a post that we put up that you like, that you resonate with, that gets your attention, be sure to share it with your friends. We'll be back in just a few days with another great episode of the show. See you then.